Hello, everyone, and welcome to the studio stream. And what you're hearing in the background is my brand new remix, which is going to be out soon. And I thought a great way to kick off our 5th anniversary celebrations would be to do a track breakdown. Now, our AAA members who get access to live streams every week, they actually saw this remix come together from absolutely nothing. And it took maybe around about 5 hours for me to do this. So we're going to break it down. We're going to look at it track by track. And it's going to be a fun time. And as I said, and as you can probably tell by the branding now and the changing of the YouTube graphics and everything else, we are celebrating our 5th anniversary. So it's an incredibly special time. And very, very happy to say that we've made it to 5 years. 2019, September the 1st, 2019 was when we first started MYT with 2 courses, I believe, and 6 months before the pandemic, if I'm allowed to say that word on YouTube. And we have grown to an incredible community that's taken in incredible success, where we have phenomenal success stories for our members like Moritz, like Sebastian Tamayo, like Four Candles, like Masano, who is obviously one of our great success stories. Everything that he's doing, he has a collaboration coming out this Friday with Stefan Bodzin on his own label, which is still absolutely incredible. And we've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artists, help them to become the best artist they can be by becoming the best version of themselves. So this is an incredibly special time. You know, the pandemic was a very, very difficult time and was actually, you know, not the most ideal time to launch a platform, although the online aspect actually seemed to help us quite a lot. So we're in celebration mode. So this month, we're going to have a huge amount of events to celebrate. We're going to be doing one of these live studio streams every week from my brand new home in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And we're going to be doing some music production, and we're going to be doing a hell of a lot of track feedback, and we are going to be announcing some very, very special guests for those track feedback sessions across the month. And as is customary, we are also in celebratory mode and in sales mode as well. So we're 5 years old. If you head over to our website, which is www.transition.studio, so you do have to put the www in, sorry, it is still a little bit old school that way, and you can get 50% off a 6-month or 12-month membership. And it's an incredibly effective program that I've been running for 5 years. As you can see here, our delightful Four Candles, who also fills in for me now on some track feedback sessions, is obviously, you know, endorsing what we do. And we grew in 5 years from 2 courses to over 25, and including insane things like we've got 5 hours of yoga on the platform. And we do incredible things like very regular track feedbacks, interesting courses, including organic house, including marketing music, which is all about music marketing, which was something we really majored in the last year, and right down to things like getting started in a couple of DAWs, Logic and Ableton Live. And they've been incredibly successful courses, as well as sound design and synth mastery courses, as well as a huge number of artist masterclasses. And I would be remiss to not actually mention the incredible artists who actually came to the platform and did incredible masterclasses for us in the last 5 years. Dam Swindle, Bushwhacker, Christoph, Denny, Rinzen, Inama, Tim Green, obviously was one of our first ones. Shadow Child was so gracious to be the very, very first artist to do something on MYT. Professional mix engineer and great friend of ours, Mike Cave, who has worked with everybody from Digitalism to Camel Fat. And of course, I would be completely doing him a disservice to not mention the legendary Patrice Baumel, who has come and done 2 masterclasses for us so far. One you can actually see. It was so good we put it out for free on our YouTube channel as part of our podcast series, which we did in the past, called Beyond the Studio, which is something we would love to go back to in the future. But you know, our primary focus is on helping you and not creating content, shall we say, although that might be changing in the future in terms of putting more content out online. And then he did an incredible members only track feedback session for us, which people got a huge amount of value from. So you can expect all of this and more. We also have a record label. We've just put an amazing album out by one of our members called Dave Leckenby, or Dave Leck. And this album has taken his career to brand new heights. I also use it as a way of releasing my own music, and we get incredible support. So the Dave Leck album was supported by the likes of Black Coffee. Recent releases by myself on the label have been supported by the likes of Hernan Cataneo and many, many other of the luminaries, shall we say, of melodic and progressive music. We've been able to introduce incredible artists like Ariel Gray, Acetone, Sebastian Tamayo, all these incredible talents from our community to a massive and brand new audience. And it's helped take their careers to the next level. And that is what our record label, which is called Emergent Properties, is all about. So if you have the ambition to release music, we have a record label. If you want to become the best artist you can be, we have that as well. And as you can see, we are on 50% off at the moment, as we say here at the top. And basically, you can go over to transition.studio and you can access that sale. And maybe there's some cheeky little bits of information over on that page that we're not going to go to. You're just going to have to go and have a look for yourself. So, beautifully put together by our lovely designer Craig. Thank you very much. All those amazing graphics and our branding for the 5th anniversary. Again, an incredible team here at MYT. Just want to give some credit to Craig for all of his hard work. Also, people who helped us get into the position we're in today, like Mr. Daniel Fisher, Rory Palmer Rowe on the marketing side of things, the brainchild of the Market Your Music course, and there's just too many others. I'd be here like an Oscars acceptance speech if I kept going. So, absolutely fantastic. So, I wanted to highlight this remix because, again, we do regular studio streams as well on the platform, and basically it's me making music, shall we say. And this track really, really came together really beautifully. So we're going to break it down in a track by track sort of situation. And one of the things that I love about remixing is being able to recontextualize a piece of music in a different genre. And when Christopher Ivor, who approached me to do this remix, when he sent me the track, it's actually a breakbeat track. It's going to be coming out soon. And what I loved about the challenge that he kind of set me was that he said, I want you to turn this into a 4/4 dance floor, really, top level progressive house track. And I love that. What remixing is all about for me is taking music from one genre or elements from one genre and applying it to another genre to make it much more interesting. And the big thing that really sat out to me or stood out to me was the vocals. And the vocals really make the track. So it became very, very evident that I needed to essentially make the remix about the vocals as well as the driving dance floor elements. So if we just start from the beginning here. And again, a very, shall we say, DJ-friendly track. And, it's all starting with the drums. Okay. So, let's break the drums down. And there's some lovely atmospheric elements, and actually there's quite a lot of the original track being used here. It's one thing like I've found in the past is sometimes I do remixes or I hear this from other artists and it's like, what did you actually use in the track? And they say, oh, the hi-hat and a couple of other things. And it's essentially an original track just with a couple of bits of the original. I was at pains here to really use a lot of the original elements, and even I got Chris to actually send me some of the MIDI files as well of, you know, the original chords of the track as well, which, you know, makes a huge difference. So I can actually work in the key of the track. And as you can see from the top corner here in Ableton, we are in D minor for this, and that is a beautiful key that worked really well. It gives a really melancholic but like really uplifting kind of feel to the track. So again, to start off, one of the things that if you've seen any of my content over the years, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the drum rack. And essentially, just a nice big solid kick there to start things off. And as you can see, I've got a couple of EQs here. Again, one that will just roll off just a very, very small amount at 20 hertz, just to kind of clean the low end up, because there is some lovely low end elements going on with the bass, which we'll get onto. And then, as you can see here, a second EQ8, which I use exclusively for automating, and I use it to just remove the low end at the right kind of parts. And you can kind of see that here if I just expand that at the right moment. I do love doing these more gradual roll-offs with a curve, you know, rather than just things coming out sharply. I do like the feeling of it's a breakdown, but it's not really a breakdown, you know, until we do the proper breakdown here at bar 113, of course. So, you know, again, a good, nice, solid kick. If I remember correctly, I think that's something I made, which is why it's got a bit of a weird file name to it. But it is very, very nice. And then from there, in terms of the rest of the drum rack, if I just play that a little bit further along, we can go through it sound by sound. And again, it's got a great groove to it. And you'd be forgiven for, you know, thinking that there's like, you know, tremendous amounts of like, you know, swing added to it. And it's actually very, very, very subtle. So I'm a big user here, as you can probably see, of the Logic swings. Again, this comes from the fact that my first DAW I really properly learned how to make electronic music on was Logic back in 2006. So the first version of Logic I ever learned to use was Logic version 7. Which was the first Apple exclusive version of Logic. Probably still my favorite version of Logic, if I'm being honest with you. It was very solid, didn't crash. But these swings were just absolutely fantastic for electronic music and progressive house in particular. So I love using this swing Logic 1653. So if you're watching this and you don't really know about what the 53 means, so 50% essentially means it's absolutely on the grid. Okay, and 53 means there's just a slight 3% offset on some of the notes, and it just gives a little bit more of a human feel. And what you can see here, if I just sort of really zoom in, you can see there's certain hi-hats and certain sounds that I've used that are slightly offset, and that is going to be a combination of both the groove and also some manual placement to actually work with the envelopes of the sounds originally. Okay, so that's how, along with very good sound selection. So again, one of the big things I teach is that 60 to 70% of my time in the studio when I'm working on tracks like this are taken up with sound selection. So it's a bit like you have to, in a painting context, for example, you have to make sure you have the right colors, the right types of paint on your palette before you start applying them to the canvas. So this is very, very important because it can solve you a multitude of issues later on. So again, I put a lot of effort into this. So again, we can go through the sounds each. We've heard the kick in isolation already. And this like GTO clock hat is a little bit of an interesting one. It has a little bit of a story to it because a lot of you know that in the past I worked with one of my musical heroes who also became a collaborator and a great friend. And he was just here in Buenos Aires a couple of weeks ago. The legend that is Sasha. And this little GTO clock kind of sound is something that was part of the libraries of sounds that we built through the Scene Delete phase, shall we say, which I can't believe that's 9 years ago nearly. That's absolutely crazy. So it's just a very, very small little knocky hi-hat with a nice, fairly loose envelope. And again, this one as well has a very shakery, long kind of envelope. And if we add in there you go. You can just see why I've just offset things here. So again, if I just play each individual sound here through this and just make sure nothing else is soloed, you'll see exactly what I mean. So again, you've got that lovely, and it's almost 2 layers where the GTO clock hat is just a little darker and a little bit more percussive. And, you know, this PH hat is actually a little more shakery. It's a bit more noise based. It's a bit brighter sounding. So the two work really nicely together. And it's the same here with the clap. So the clap is Ali 1, which if I remember correctly, I think I found in the Machine 2 sample library, which to this day is one of the most underrated sample libraries of all time because you get it free with Machine. It's a fantastic, fantastic sample library. And it kind of goes under the radar a little bit, but it's been one of my most used sample libraries just because of the breadth and the quality and the, I don't know, the timelessness of the sounds. Like a lot of them are so classic. Then actually from Ableton, I really wanted an acoustic ride. And one of the reasons why I love acoustic rides in electronic tracks like this is because it just offers a flavor of something a bit more natural. Okay. So I love the juxtaposition of sounds between the very, very natural, human played, real musical instruments, like a real cymbal here, and something incredibly synthetic and electronic that can't exist anywhere else but in a computer or in a drum machine, for example, or in an analog circuit or a digital circuit for that matter. So my most influential artists over the years have been the likes of Trent Moller, who blends this into incredible effect. And there's this stark contrast between the acoustic and the synthetic. And I love that. So I wanted to give like a really nice human feel to this whole enterprise, shall we say. And then again, a lovely, very direct hi-hat here. And again, the shapes and the envelopes of those sounds, as well as the programming of the grooves and the institution of the swing from Logic is a very, very important part. And again, you can see how I use the drum rack essentially to switch sounds on and off. And then later on, we get the final sound added, which we'll listen to now, which is just a classic 909 ride. And one of the things I love about Live 12 is I'm starting to use a much wider diversity of sounds. And the reason for that is because I'm using these new searches that are on the sidebar where I can look for the 909 ride and then it will give me a huge range of sounds that are similar to that. So this sound similarity engine in Live 12 has become one of the best ways for me to discover sounds. So I have my, shall we say, stock sounds that I will always reach for, like this kick drum. But then I can find so many more interesting drums from there. So it just makes things so much more interesting. So again, this sound similarity engine has helped me to evolve my sound quite dramatically. So again, I've got this juxtaposition here. Again, the contrast, if we listen again, between the 909 ride and then the acoustic ride. And I've dropped the transposition down quite a lot on that 909 ride. Not only because I love those really low detuned kind of 909 sounds, because they're very techno. Again, I wanted to just put a bit of a techno edge to this, especially when I want things to be a little bit more aggressive after the drop. But also because you've got this lovely, lighter, brighter sound. And the only thing I've done here is on both sounds is just scrape the low end a little bit, because one of the things with rides is that there can be a lot of low end. Then the only other thing I've done is added kickstart. Kickstart 1, yes, I know there's kickstart 2, but it just does what I want it to do. Do you know what I mean? And I've got so many of these tools. I've got LFO tool, I've got Devious Machines Duck, I've got Cable Guys Shaper Box, I've got so many of them. But I just always keep going back to this because it's just got the most satisfying envelopes, you know? So from there, there's a couple of little claps that will, again, we heard the first clap, the alley clap. And again, this has got like a bit of a finger click to it because I wanted the clap to have a bit more snap to it. And it just adds a lovely overall layer. And again, this is where, again, as I say, sound selection is absolutely paramount, because I can blend these sounds, again, very, very minimal EQ, not even EQing, just filtering, and the two sounds sit really, really nicely together. So if you're struggling with this and you need a bit of help, then obviously that's what we're here for at MYT, through things like track feedback sessions, one-to-one training, and a number of different aspects. But the number one thing we'll help you with is with your sound selection. And it's like a muscle. It's like as I say, a muscle that you have to develop over time. And as you get more feedback, as you gain more understanding of the production process from a deep artistic level, we're very different to other platforms. Yes, we're going through something a bit more instructional here, but we're more focused on the art itself and storytelling. So we'll get into that, as this being an example of musical storytelling that we'll be able to look at as an example of what we try and espouse here at MYT. And again, the sound selection does that. It helps with the storytelling. But if you get the sound selection right, as you can see here, this saves a huge multitude of problems when it comes to the mix, because the two sounds are very highly specifically selected in order to go together. That's the whole point. So there's your drum rack. And again, from a programming perspective, I love this because it means that I can just be in the session view, as it were, just getting nice grooves going. And again, you can actually see that it started off live as a 1-bar loop, and then it expands out into an 8-bar loop. Okay, so again, modular, easy elements to be able to work with on a more macro level when we get to the entirety of the arrangement. So we have that. So let's go back to the intro and let's just pick apart some of the other aspects. And this is one of my favorite sounds. And this is going to make me sound hideously arrogant. And the reason why it's one of my favorite sounds is because of the movement it gives. But it's also one of the reasons that I love this sound so much is because I made it from scratch. So basically, if you have seen me online in any other capacity, because I do a lot of sound design work as well, I do a lot for companies like Plugin Alliance. I've done preset packs for things like Unfiltered Audio Lion in the past. And also for our great friends and partners over at ADSR, who have been tremendous supporters of MYT in the last few years. I've done a lot of live streams for those guys in terms of many, many different things. A lot of Arturia stuff like Analog Lab, Pigments, Acid V, their effects collection, all sorts of stuff. So if you want more of this type of content from me personally on YouTube, you can head over to our great friends at ADSR. And there's plenty of live streams of me talking about brand new plugins. Again, Baby Audio have been amazing with new plugins over the last year or so. Eventide have done some stuff for them. And basically, what this Touring Cars preset is from a pack called the Melodic Techno Pack for Pigments. Okay, so you can actually see it here. So again, this is a pack that I created for ADSR, and this noise sequence is something that I've made obviously in Pigments. Pigments is one of my favorite synths. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was a long time user of multiple other synths, including Omnisphere, and I absolutely adore Omnisphere to this day. However, I've got to admit that since Pigments came along, I've noticed that I've been using Omnisphere less and less because it's just so immediate. And again, this is an incredibly simple sound that just adds just an incredible amount of movement. And again, it's doing a lot of that modulation on its own. Because again, I've assigned one of these random, and this is why it's called Touring Cars, because it has a Turing generator that's just doing random step signals. And I've applied that as a modulator to the multi-mode filter here. And as well, you can see that on the phaser as well. So there's this lovely, lovely movement. And again, a little bit of EQ, our good friend Kickstart. And again, if I was to just go to the drum rack and just put the kick back in. Just that you can just sit, and it just, if you look at the arrangement here, it just bubbles away throughout the entirety of the track, going about its business in the background, just adding this lovely level of groove. And none of it's automated because it's moving dynamically quite well on its own because of the modulation that I've added. But again, I could change things like the bandpass filter if I wanted to, or the phaser, the envelope as well. That's not mapped to anything, but you get the idea. But again, it's keeping things incredibly simple and layering things in an incredibly beautiful way. That's what it's all about. So again, it's allying these amazing drum grooves. And again, I'll just play the whole drum groove here with everything out the drum rack. And this is where we'll start getting into elements of the original track. So again, there's these lovely little subtle percussions, which I'll just turn up a bit. And you'll notice not everything's playing because I've added some clip automation. So what I've looked for here are, okay, I want just this part of the loop. Reason being is that it gets a bit busy, it gets a bit overly cluttered, shall we say, and it can become a bit problematic. But this is one of the original parts from the original record. And again, another one, the lo-fi perk. And there's no automation on that for the clip. And because they come from the original track, they have a nice call and response, and it adds a nice texture to the main overall meat of the drum groove. Okay, so very, very nice. Then from here, thank you very much, Gav Easby. Absolutely, it is, mate. It is. It's amazing we got that far. And thank you to Mr. Abraham Clark for getting the Pigments pack. Amazing. And yes, Mr. Moosk, one of our AAA members, is very right in when he says that kickstart is the Swiss Army knife of music production tools. Absolutely. One of them. And essentially, yeah, going back into here, we've got these lovely Ludwig cymbals. So these are like a really, really nice pack of like loops that I've found. And again, it's that acoustic vibe, right? And it's just amazing like how much swing and groove. And I wanted something at the end of every 4 bars to really accentuate the movement between the phrases. So that hi-hat opening up is absolutely beautiful for that. So again, we play everything together. And again, this is where we start getting into shakers and tambourines. Over the years, I've developed just a bit of a hellacious library of things like 16th note percussions, hi-hats, shakers, tambourines. This is one that I go to all the time. It's a print of a 122 BPM tambourine loop that I found in another amazing Spectrasonics plugin called Stylus RMX, which I tend to use a little bit less of these days, but I've basically printed like all the loops that I love from that plugin. But it's a fantastic little taste. It just adds an extra level into the percussion. Then, if we want to talk about things like this, we've got another one of our favorite plugins here. And this is another one where it's like, yes, I know there's a Shimmer Shake Strike too. No, I haven't had time to upgrade. But actually, we've got one of our great friends to thank for introducing us to Shimmer Shake Strike, which has become one of the favorite tools of the MYT membership, and it's Tim Green. So if you go to our YouTube channel, which you are on now if you're watching this, so yeah, welcome. Well done, Paul. You will be able to go back and actually be able to watch Tim Green break down one of his tracks from All Day I Dream called Vacation to Life. And that was one of the first pandemic masterclasses that we did. And that went down like an absolute storm, and people still text me and send me messages about that to this day. And one of the main tools that he uses to get that lovely organic house shaker type groove is Shimmer Shake Strike. So this is something that we use quite a lot. And again, you'll hear it. And again, there's an extra little element because there's the extra little claves there. And it's just got a lovely movement. So again, adding... We have the tams. So these are all almost like 16th note loops that I'm putting in here. That just add so much depth and texture to the whole enterprise, shall we say. Again, one of my favorite shaker loops is the Sakamoto shaker. And that just adds another layer again. Now, these two here, the bongos and congas that you can hear that have just come in, if I just put Shimmer Shake Strike away. Because I spent a little bit of time programming that, getting the right types of shaker. Like, you've got all these different elements. And again, Shimmer Shake Strike 2 is even more in-depth than that. So you can do things like claves, bottles, triangles, all sorts of stuff, and many, many different types of shakers. And you can obviously program them independently, pan them left and right, just to give width and, a nice overall stereo image. These two loops here are from probably one of the most ancient sample packs I have. Steve Lawler, dark progressive, dark percussive and techno. Like, I think I was using this back at like 2004, something like that. And there's still some amazing sounds. So let's listen to both of those loops together, because again, you can see there's envelopes here. So same on both. So actually hitting at the same time, but with slightly different panning. Just add everything together. And again, there's a lovely loop here from the boys at PML. So again, you can see the envelopes for the clip gain are incredibly important when you're actually splicing together multiple layers of audio loops like this, because you can imagine what it sounds like without all of it. Very messy, the groove's a bit cluttered, it takes up a lot of space in the track. Whereas if you can be selective about, right, I want this part from this loop, I want this part from another file, and you can actually hear the call and response, the way that they tonally talk to each other, it works really, really nicely. So there's a lot of detail and thought gone into the layers. And again, sometimes they might overlap and they might play together like the Steve Lawler loops, but everything is designed to take up just the amount of space it needs to and nothing more, whilst adding depth. And that's how you get these really lovely kind of hybrid, progressive, organic drums. So if I just play the whole thing now. Just brilliant movement. Really, really happy with that. And again, it's really funny because I remember the first time I had a stab at trying to do this remix, shall we say. It was a bit tricky because the drums weren't quite right. Like the ideas were there, but the drums were not quite delivering the musical ideas. And the first live stream I did on this was all on the drums. And it was amazing how quickly it kind of came together once we got the textures and the drums right. So again, I'm doing sessions like this all the time where I'm actually working on my own music as an active artist as well. And it's incredibly satisfying to actually allow people into that process as well. So we're back at the intro now, and we're going to start listening to some of the more non-drum related elements. And this one is a great one. And you hear this right from the beginning. And there's some lovely, lovely elements here. Just really, really lovely. And what I've done here is like one of my favourite tricks when I'm using parts for a remix. And it's pretty much just take what it's doing and knock it down by an octave. So again, if I play that with... This is what the original sound was doing. And I loved it, but it just felt a little bit too low for what I was going for. And I wanted something that could add this lovely synth-like dreamy texture, but just do it in a way that connected more to the drums and connected the low end and the high end a little bit more. So again, this is one of the original parts from the track. Beautifully put together track by Mr. Ivor. Well done. And there's a secondary part that starts to come in. And again, if we listen to that in isolation, again, it's looping. But you can hear that lovely gated kind of vibe. Again, this is one of the oldest tricks in the book when it comes to Ableton. But I love manipulating the warp engine. So I put beats in as the warp mode, even though it's a pad. So again, you get amazing results by going contrary to what the warp mode is. And again, this is just a great sound design tip. It's always great to use tools that might be counter to the type of instrument that you are looking to create or looking to work with. So, do things like put vocal compressors on kicks, that kind of thing. Put pads in beat mode, all these things that just run completely the opposite. Try it, experiment with it, and you never know what you're going to get. So again, preserving on the 16th because you can hear that 16th cut. And again, the envelope mode means that it gets into this lovely stuttered pattern. And if I just play that again. It just adds that movement again. And again, just another instance of kickstart. Just give the whole thing a bit more movement. And what you've heard, that new element there, that melody wet here. Honestly, I'm not doing anything. It's actually part of the original, and the original part was so good and so nice that I wanted to use it for this particular end. And then I've got two layers. So this one I do a little bit more on. It's the same in terms of like it's the actual same loop, but I actually add an octave. So again, with the ARP 2 wet here, I'm dropping an octave. Here, I'm increasing an octave and I'm manipulating the warp engine to get a lovely overall sound. So it adds an accent on top, which adds to the emotion. And again, adding the drums in. Just great. So again, they're floating on top, but also rhythmically snapping themselves to the groove and also contributing rhythmically as well as giving an overall emotional context, which works really nicely. Again, I've got a nice little hit here, which again is from the original parts. Some of them reversed. And then others, like the one at the intro of the track, that's one of the first things you hear when the track starts. And again, just intelligent placement of the more melodic elements. So again, because so much of the original track was so good, it was more about how can I frame these parts in a way that works in that context. And again, when we talk about framing and layering and adding more to it, nothing could be a better example than what was going on here with the violas. And if I play a little bit further on, so these are part of the original record. And as soon as I heard these, it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing with this. Just lovely emotion overall. So from here, I decided and started to put my film scoring head on. So for those of you who know about me, I also do film music and have done in the past. So any opportunity for me to get the orchestras out, I'm doing it. So I layered this viola with an entire string ensemble in a couple of different ways. So what I've done is I've gone to an old favorite or two instances of an old favorite, which is the Symphony Essentials from Complete, 13, something like that. I mean, I know they're on to like Complete 15 or 16 now, something like that. I know they just announced it. But I keep going back to these string ensembles because they're absolutely beautiful. And I've got two different, in fact, I've got three. I've got three different instances of this that are all automated. So essentially, it's like the same orchestra but layered three times, and then you get the violas on top. So if I play this section, you'll see what I mean. So these are just the sampled strings. And what you'll get is the dynamics of how these are played increasing over time. So adding in the violas. And there you go. So you get that crescendo. So the dynamics is controlling the level and the volume and the intensity of how the orchestra plays. So it changes the tone and the texture. So we've got three what we would call different articulations. So three different ways or four different ways. 1, 2, 3. Yes, three. That the orchestra is playing. So the first one we'll listen to is known as a sordino, sustained vibrato. So you can hear that just slight quivering, which just brings more emotion. And then layered with a second, which is what we call the harmonics. So the harmonics are when the string sections, the string instruments like your violas, your cellos, your basses, your violins, are played more towards the nut of the like the bridge of the actual instrument. So you get that that sort of wooden part that suspends the strings. So you get this really lovely woody, very textured sound, which is very popular with neoclassical composers like Oliver Arnolds or Kiasmos or Nils Frahm, for example. So you'll hear this, and this has been one of my favourite string ensembles I've been using for a number of years now. And you hear that lovely, noisy element. And then when you add that on top with the sordino, they just work really beautifully together. So if we play, let me just mute that. There we go. There's the two together. And then the final being more of a straight sustain. So the three of them working together are quite powerful. And again, stacked, all being played by the same MIDI here, which is, again, the original MIDI from the original version of the track, which Christopher was so kind to send over. And this plays an amazing role in a couple of different ways, because not only does it give the back into the whole track like this, it really does help in another department, which we're going to get to shortly. So again, I've taken what the original artist has done and I've iterated on it, and I've tried to upgrade it, tried to put it in a more grand context that really, really does, speak to the emotion of the track. There's a story being told. And the story's being told pretty much through the vocals, which we're going to get to in a moment. In fact, we should get to them now, actually. Now I've mentioned them. So we've still got bass to look at. There's a couple of bass layers in here doing some pretty interesting stuff. But ultimately, we've got some, really, really beautiful musical elements here. So if I just play sort of the breakdown a little bit, you'll start to get an appreciation of the vocals. Fine. So yeah, so you get the idea. So the vocal is like really paramount to this. It's like this really beautiful, haunting sound. And again, like not to labor the point too much, but when you receive parts this good, you don't need to completely transform them. Okay? So I'm really, really happy with like what Chris has sent over because then I can just, as I say, I can just frame it in a different way. So ultimately, we'll play the vocals in isolation. And all I'm doing is using a send to a very basic reverb. I think it might actually be the reverb that Ableton loads with, actually. And then just adding a little bit of delay. And it's not even a, posh echo or anything like that. It's just a nice, simple, what you would call in the past versions of Ableton a ping pong delay. That's all it is. And it just frames the vocal. And again, in terms of actual processing, a little bit of compression, no side chaining, just in case you were wondering. I'm just rolling off the bottom end a little bit. That's it. So there you go. So it's got this amazing vocoded kind of vibe to it. And essentially, what you can see here is that throughout the track, I've very deliberately held back and just used the first part, the first chunk of that vocal. So this part here. And then once we've got into the breakdown, I've decided to elaborate on it and open it out more. And then after the drop, you get the full versions of the vocals right the way through to when the vocal comes out. The only bit of sound design really that I've done is I've done one of my favorite tricks, which is the reverse reverb. So what I'll do in this case is I will reverse the vocal. I'll then put the vocal to a very, very large reverb, which I think was our classic MYT accelerator reverb, which, yes, I'm still using. Yes, it's still free on the website. And yes, believe it or not, I have it on very good authority that Masano is still using this on every one of his tracks. I know, because he told me. But anyway, that's by the by. So you use this huge cavernous reverb, and then if you think about it, you've got the vocal running backwards, but the reverb is forwards. Then you take a print of this from resampling, so you can resample it onto a new audio track. Then when you reverse it again, what have you got? You've got the vocal forwards and the reverb backwards. So then I can play around with this. I can cut it into various different aspects. And as you can see, it just sits nice and perfectly. So if we play that now as part of that, this is what you're hearing. So you get the idea that it almost feels like the whole record is like preparing and like sucking you in to that reverb. That's the entire point. So very, very cool. And just little things like this make a huge difference. So we'll hear that in context of the entire record. So you get the idea. It's a transitional effect. It's working really nicely that way. And again, even though it's not a major, massive part of the record, it's actually very important because it smooths the transitions over between the two sections and it lets the listener know that there's something on the way, there's something coming. Okay. So again, I've kept it very simple. And, I know Abraham said there's a question at the end about how much to use of the original. As I said, I've done remixes where I've used a hi-hat. I've done remixes like this where the major parts of the record are there intact and not actually messed around with or processed too much. They're there just to, you know, be what they are, but I'm just placing them, like I've said multiple times already, in a different context for the dance floor. So I'm taking breakbeat elements and I'm adding them to something that's a bit more 4/4 and a bit more driving. So that's the entire point. So use as much as you feel you can. That is what the answer to that question really, really is. So again, because I've been blessed with the parts the way I have, it's just very easy to just highlight them. So one of the things that we talked about before, and we'll move on to this, is the fact that I had the original chords sent over as MIDI files by Chris, which makes a huge difference because then I don't have to sit there and work them out. And he did a bang up job getting them ready. And this ARP, which is kind of like the more uplifting element in the track, could not be simpler in terms of what it is. So yeah, there seems like there's a lot going on. And there's some stuff that I've got in there that I chose not to do to not overcomplicate things. Okay. And this is where it comes down to having a less is more approach and also having an approach to optimizing storytelling. I think if there's one problem that we've got in modern electronic music production culture is that we're not thinking enough in terms of storytelling. We're thinking in terms of like, yeah, let's make a banger, bro, and let's get it signed to a big label and do what we need to do. But there's not enough attention being paid to storytelling, narrative, the art of it, essentially. So that's my primary drive, and it's the primary drive of the community, regardless of what genre they're making. Yes, music like this, progressive house, does lend itself more to storytelling. But all great dance music records, regardless of their genre, are great stories, essentially. So, as you heard, it's just a very standard sound. There's an arpeggiator. It's not really doing anything too fancy. It's just there doing 16th notes being played by the chords. So, again, an arpeggio is essentially just broken chords in sequence. That's what it is. If you want to know more about that music theory type stuff, we've got a full music theory course on the platform that has stood the test of time very, very well. And essentially, that's all it's doing. So again, I'm in D minor. I know I am. I could actually add more to this, and this is what I mean about this. So I've added a random, and I was doing some explorations around this, and I've added a scale. In fact, are we in D minor or are we in A minor? I think we're in A minor. Might be a bit of a discrepancy there. But, looking at it, yeah, I think we are in A minor actually. But we can play around with it. So the whole idea was to play around with this, try and get some added randomness, but then constrain it to a scale. And you can hear some of it going wildly out. So again, I think actually the A minor is the more correct element there. So apologies for leading people down the garden path on that one. That's a discrepancy on my part. But you can also hear how even just at doing a 20% chance, adding notes, so the notes only ever go upwards, it just adds a layer of complication that just doesn't need to be there. So I decided to deactivate that and just have it be a nice fluttering sound that just does what it needs to do. And again, the sound, the actual synth sound, wavetable, one of the great synths as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely love it. There's a wavetable course as part of MYT as well, if you really want to go deep into it. And again, it's just very, very simple automations. So you'll see this, and this is where it gets a little bit more elaborate. So I'll put that on filter one frequency, and then I'll put this on time as well. Okay, so you can see that's where the automations become a little bit more elaborate. So here with me in my small setup here in Argentina, I've got an Akai APC40 Mark II, an absolute gold find if you can get one. For some reason, like Akai made the very, very silly decision to discontinue. Fantastic. And actually a lot lighter and a lot more portable than, say, something like a Push 2 and certainly a Push 3. It's not a disparage on a Push 2. I own one. It's back in England, but it's absolutely, heavy beast to travel with. And I've also got an Akai MPK Mini little keyboard here. And the automations were done on the APC40 Mark II. Okay. So these were live. So I did this as, one or I think it was two different passes of the track overall to give more of a live feel. So again, like to go to the actual sound itself, very basic, just some nicely lightly detuned sawtooth waves and just a good solid plucky envelope, and again some side chaining. And the side chaining, actually there's two parts to it. One is to compress the actual sound itself, and then the other one is actually to sidechain it to the vocals to create space for the vocals. So that's very much a mixing trick. So you'll hear this flutter as it builds. Again, absolutely no EQ. When it comes to mix down, just a little bit of 6 dB per octave roll off using the Slate Digital. And it's just cycling through the chords. And a little bit of accelerator reverb right on the end. So yeah, so it all seems to just reconnect into being chords at the end. That's the whole point. But again, to play it from further back, it starts off very simply with the initial chord. So that A2, C3, E3 chord. And very, very plucky. And providing a lot of drive, but also a lot of melodic feeling. And again, we can play that into the breakdown, and you can just see that little bit of side chaining happening on the synth ARP flutters from the vocal. So it's sitting the vocal on top of this so it doesn't overwhelm the vocal. So the vocal is king. So let's listen to the back end of the breakdown. And you can just hear, even though the synth's very powerful, the vocal still has room to breathe. So I suppose the next thing to look at is how to handle the drop. So let's have a listen to the drop itself. Again, this part is just so good, I just wanted to highlight it on its own. So it's a different type of drop. It kind of comes in stages, and the end result is very different. So it's back to the vocal and just the groove. Like there's nothing else like the ARP or anything else coming back in. I wanted to create that contrast. So if those of you watching, if you're struggling to create great breaks and drops and builds, the best piece of advice that I can give you is about contrast. So if you're going to build something up to the level that I just did there, the best way to make the best possible drop is to have an extreme contrast of energy. So if you noticed, it builds all the way right the way up and then gets to the very top and then it drops all the way down into just this synth line. And even then, when it does eventually drop back in, I've removed a lot of elements. So what it does is that not only does it create more emotion, more impact, it also as well allows you to recycle the sounds, because after we'll play this section in a moment, you'll see what I mean. It gives me a chance to cleanse the palette. People don't get too tired of the sounds that they've heard consistently now for the best part of 5 minutes, because this is a long remix. This is 9 minutes or so, which I don't normally make something that long, but I just loved it so much. It was just like, no, it just needs to be what it is. So it gives me a chance to, as I say, reintroduce those sounds in a different and more interesting combination after the drop. So it's not as if we're just going to go back to what it did before. We're doing it in a slightly different way because we've reached here at this drop almost the destination. And this is what I mean about storytelling. You have to understand what kind of story you're telling people on the dance floor. The beginning, the middle, and the end. The hero's journey, if you will, of the track itself. And you must always give people on the dance floor, listeners, an understanding of where you're going. You might not be able to tell them where exactly we're going, but we know we're going somewhere and it's going to be interesting when we get there. So we've been building this track up now for 5, nearly 6 minutes. And we've had this incredible crescendo at the top. So we've reached the top of the mountain. Now it's about how do I interestingly reprise or reactivate or recycle these sounds to make it still feel like we're going somewhere, we're heading to another destination. So we'll talk about the actual bass stabs you've heard in a moment, but I just really want to be at pains to talk about this because it's something I'm very passionate about. about helping producers to create better storytelling in tracks, because that's ultimately what people are looking for. We never had a section in the track that was just dominated by groove this way and just highlighting vocals. And we're gradually bringing the wet arc 2 back in. So we've got 16 bars of just groove here already. So by the time this is all over, you're talking 32 bars of just pure groove. So now the strings and the arpeggios are back in. We haven't heard them for a while. Now we're heading to our next generation. Our next destination, I should say. Which is another mini breakdown, where we bring everything to a head. And then everything is now grooving towards the end. And now we're in the transition towards the outro. So you can see how there's been a story told there of peaks and troughs, of massive build-ups of energy and emotion, followed by moments of just heads down, let's get on with it, let's groove, let's get into the drums and let's dance, you know? And again, it brings back some of those elements, but it brings it back in an interesting way that gives people an opportunity to miss the elements that are in the track for a long time and have been the whole point of the record, but then later on need to be brought back in so we can get to our final destination. So, if anything, the thing that I'm most happy about with these elements are, and with this remix in general, are things like the arrangements and the structure of the storytelling. Very, very, very important. So, I suppose the last element we're going to look at is the bass, because there's a couple of different elements to it here. And let's play around. Let's have a little listen. So you get this, like, I would call this like a groove arp, because it's not in all the time. It's just there just to give a bit of a flavor. So if I play that with the drums overall, and it just adds a lovely groove. And a lower layer. And then the actual progression of the The chords are reflected here. So that movement in the bass is underpinning everything, okay? And it's been taken from that main MIDI file that the strings are doing, that the ARP is being triggered by. It's everything. And both of these layers are reflecting that. So it's very simple: A, E, D, and N, F. And it just gives that flow and gives that movement. Again, both pigments. So again, pigments featuring very heavily here, which I absolutely love. And again, this is an adaptation of a preset that I use for the Melodic Techno pack from ADSR, which is available there. I'll put a link to that pack underneath in the description after I've finished the video today. So if you're watching this in the future, you should be able to get a direct link straight to it. So again, this was an arpeggio type sound that I made. Very, very simple with, you know, just some analog. There is a sample in there. There's like a little pluck sound in there. And again, actually nothing going on in that utility engine. You could actually get away with turning that off. And there's a little bit of LFO just on some FM, which is just making the waveform slightly more complex and gives it some more dynamic movement. Again, bit of kickstart, a little bit of EQ8 rolling off the low end, nothing too complicated. The sound's good, it's actually doing what it needs to. And then here for the pigments on the main sort of stab bass, again, it's another preset from the Melodic Techno pack. I promise it's not done for a plug. I'm just really happy that I made presets for a synth that I'm actually using. Phenomenal. So again, it's just got that depth. And all the effects that you can hear there are actually onboard pigments. The delay, the multi-band, the compressor, it's just got everything you need there. And again, just a basic analog engine. So, you know, I'm using pigments as this incredibly utilitarian synth that I could reach for other synths. Like, again, Omnisphere for the granular stuff. I could reach for things like Diva for these types of sounds, or Silent, or any other that you can think of. Pigments can honestly do it all, and it's just my workhorse synth now. You know, I know a lot of people really love Serum. I'll be honest, like, Serum's been a good synth for me, but I never really gelled with it the way that I've gelled with Arturia Pigments. I absolutely love the thing. And then finally, the final bass is the one that's actually in the breakdown. Now, this one isn't probably that much of a surprise. For those of you who have seen anything that I do, I still worship at the altar of Monarch. I'm afraid. I still think it's one of the greatest bass synths ever made, either hardware or software. I just do. Just the sound of it. And honestly, like, I'm literally just gonna let it play for itself. I mean, come on. Very nice. And in a sort of a shocking departure, I would normally want to, you know, give that a bit of a rip in the past. And I've kept it really simple here because it's just underpinning everything else. And again, with these types of like Reese style basses that are there for emotional underpinnings, because that's exactly what it's doing. I mean, listen to the breakdown and listen to it without. I mean, it's good, but it's not effective. And literally all I need to do to the thing is roll off a little bit of low end at like what, 20? And that's it. That's literally it. No automation, nothing. Just placed in the mix. It's underpinning the strings, the emotion, the vocals, everything. I mean, you take it away, it's just not the same breakdown. But again, it's having a little bit of discipline because I love that sound to not put it in the rest of the track. Because if I started putting this after the break and whatever, it would start to be a little bit too cluttered and not really offering anything, and it's overused. Again, I've used this term a lot, and I think I might have used it in a lot of public live streams, but I remember having a conversation once with Nile Rodgers from Chic, and he always talked about the one time only event. The one thing that you do in a record that only happens at that part of the record, and having the discipline to not over deploy that sound is part of what makes good music. Or like to think this is good. So it's having that discipline. And that bass serves its purpose in that particular part of the record only. That's the entire point of the exercise. So this is what I've tried to do. Again, I've tried to take these incredible elements from a beautiful original track and recontextualize them into something that would be very effective on a dance floor in a 4/4 setting. And again, being very, very fortunate to work with such amazing parts. All you've got to do is showcase them. You don't need to smash them to pieces, tear them apart, overcomplicate things. Just tell a good story. And this is one of the simplest tracks that I've ever made. And yeah, there's a lot of layers to it, absolutely. I mean, you're probably talking, with all the drum rack layers and everything else, you're probably getting on for a good 45, 50 layers, 50 tracks. And there's a lot of percussion going on and everything else. But, that's a consequence of living in South America, I'm afraid. So yeah, it's a beautiful remix that I'm very, very happy with. This is going to be out soon, so you've had a bit of a preview of it today, which is very, very good, and I'm very happy with that. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure over the last 90 minutes to just sort of guide you through this a little bit. And like I mentioned before as well, we are celebrating the 5th birthday. That's why we're doing this. And we've got, again, the 50% off sale. I would be, irresponsible as a business owner to not mention that as we progress. And as I mentioned, there's going to be some amazing events that we're going to be launching very, very soon. And it's going to be a great month. So now, if you've ever wanted to take your music more seriously and you wanted to join the likes of Four Candles, Masano, Rinzen, Aname, blah, 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 everyone we've worked with, everyone that's ever come for a masterclass and join them at the top end of the industry, we know how to do that. We've got a proven track record now. Again, if you look at the labels that we've helped people get signed to over the years, it's very, very serious and is one of the best, I think, track records in the entire industry. Of course, I would say that I'm horribly biased, but if you don't blow your own trumpet, nobody else will. So it's a pleasure and an honor, to be completely honest with you, to help guide people to become the best artists that they can be. And it's what takes up the better part of my life, essentially, as well as my own creative endeavors, some of which you've seen before, which we always turn into teachable moments as well. So again, 50% off. That means you'll get 12 months for the price of 6, 6 months for the price of 3. It's an incredible offer, brilliant value for money. You get to be part of this incredible community that never cease to amaze me with the quality and the depth of talent. And also you get the opportunity to be considered for our record label Emergent Properties, which has already had multiple Beatport number ones, has been featured. Every single release has been featured on Beatport, and we're very proud of that, along with our label partners in distribution, Label Works, who have done fantastic work helping us to really turn this into a reputable, viable record label from minute one. And we're continuing on the legacy of my previous record label, Chapter 24 Records, where we took artist development incredibly seriously. So, yes, thank you for joining this kickoff to our 5th birthday celebrations. And yes, it's going to be a fun time. So, again, we're going to be doing public track feedback sessions. We're going to be doing more of these studio sessions, and it's going to be a fun time. So, yeah, please, if you haven't, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live. And yeah, become part of the family and consider joining. www.transition.studio. We're there. I'm available on social media. My name is Paul James Nolan on Instagram. Have any questions? Drop me a line. If you want to email me, paul@transition.studio. We're here for you. We're here to help. We're here to help you become the artist that you know you can be. Okay, so there's enough of the sales pitch. I'm going to depart and get on with the rest of my day. It's been a pleasure guiding you through the latest remix and to introduce you to this epic month of savings and celebrations. And I hope to see some of you soon. And I hope to see some of you in the membership area. So, yeah, keep it locked. See you soon.